Hi, I'm Lisa Fletcher, and you're in the stream. Today, 1 in 7 Latina teenagers in the U.S. has contemplated suicide. What's making them feel so hopeless? And what can be done to help them? Anousheh Hossain is our guest digital producer. She blogs at anoushehspoint.com and is in for Malika, and she's looking out for your live feedback. Anousheh, a lot of people speculating about why Latina girls have such a disproportionately high rate of suicide and attempted suicide.
Yes, Lisa, we're going to be talking about these issues much deeper, of course, during the show, but we're hearing a lot of stuff from our online community, everything from factors such as language issues to cultural barriers. Right. But, of course, it's a live show. We want to hear from you. If you at home want to join us, tweet me using the hashtag AJStream.
Joining us via Skype is Beatrice Cornell, the program coordinator for Life is Precious. That is an initiative based in New York City that's working to prevent suicide among young Latinas. Beatrice, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So today we've got a number of guests coming to us through Google Plus Hangout. You can be in future Hangouts on the stream. Just go to the link below and add us to your circles.
Hi, my name is Mustafa. I'm a Scottish Pakistani journalist and I'm in the stream.
Latina teens, compared to white and black girls in the U.S., have the highest rate of suicide. According to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, quote, of students in grades 9 to 12, significantly more Hispanic female students, 13.5%, reported attempting suicide. That's in 2011. And that's about 5% higher than both black and white girls in the same age group. A common thread among these girls is that they're often caught in a culture clash between immigrant parents and their first-generation American life. The highest concentration of Latina teenagers who have contemplated or committed suicide is in New York City. According to one doctor, in 2011, 22% of Hispanic teens in the New York neighborhood of Brooklyn alone attempted suicide. Now that's one report, but it is an incredibly high number. So here to try to break down why this is happening are a number of guests in our Google Hangout. Raquel Cepeda is a Dominican-American journalist, writer, and currently working on a documentary about Latina suicide. She tipped us off to this story. Raquel is also the author of Bird of Paradise, How I Became Latina, an exploration of race and identity in America. Also joining us is Lauren Gulbas, a research assistant professor at Dartmouth College. She co-authored an academic study on this topic. And we have Eric Ibarra, founder and executive director of Las Fotos Project, a community-based photography program that aims to create positive change in the lives of young Latinas facing adversity. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Beatrice, I want to start with you. Your organization in New York, Life is Precious, is primarily concerned with suicide prevention for Latina teens. And while the number is high nationally, and we're going to get to that a little later, it is the highest in New York. What do you believe is driving these young Latinas to suicide or attempted suicide in such incredibly high numbers?
Well, I actually have a list because it's a number of factors and they're actually all relative. There's a lot of environmental stressors that are coming into play, and you mentioned immigration and acculturation, which is actually one of the most predominant. And then after that, we have parental conflict, changes in the family structure. So, for example, there's an absent father or an absent mother. And what this happens is that here we see that the parents are neither emotionally or physically available for these girls. So a lot of our girls are spending a lot of time on their own. Trauma such as sexual abuse, sexual assault, rape, poverty, living in poor living conditions. We see some of our family members that they may be a family of 7 living in a 2-bedroom apartment. School bullying, school segregation, where some of our girls just don't fit in with anyone or any of the groups. Failing school systems. We would say that about 50% of our girls have been left back at least once. Excuse me. Disparities. And one of the main concerns that we have is that a lot of the population that we work with do not have access to mental health care. And if they do have access to mental health care, then there may be a language barrier where the girl may be being treated, but the parent, who's an integral part in the treatment plan, can't be involved because they don't speak the English language.
Right.
So how is this important information going to get
So
translated.
I think these are all the very broad issues that we'll be discovering, hopefully one by one throughout the course of the program. But Raquel, you've been working on a documentary about Latina teens in New York. You've called it Deconstructing Latina. And one of the things you've done in the documentary is you're diving into these issues of trying to fit in and disenfranchisement. What did you discover in terms of what these girls are uniquely struggling with? I need you to unmute yourself.
About that. Sorry.
There you go.
What I found really most interesting is when I went to go speak about a career in media at LIP, at Life is Precious in the Bronx, I realized that a lot of the girls, when I shut up and let them talk, they were relaying stories that were very similar to my own upbringing and of, feeling liminal, feeling like they're in limbo, whether it's to do with, culture or language barriers, but specifically race, not feeling like they're Black American enough to fit into the mainstream, not feeling like they're not white American enough, and also being bullied and called, illegal and not made to feel like they're a part of the fabric of the society. And when you're walking around as a teenager ungrounded like that, I mean, it does something to your psyche.
What is it, though, about Latino Americans versus Japanese Americans or Middle Eastern Americans? I mean, these kids all, I'm sure, go through experience a similar type of struggle. What is it about these Latina girls that's driving them to the brink of suicide or to suicide?
It's a lot of, it's just a lot of societal pressure and pressures at home. Boys are, I'm sure we've all heard this, boys are doted on like they are in most communities, but the girls actually experience a lot more pressure than many in other communities. They have these dreams and desires about, making it big and going to university, to college, but then at home they're stuck taking care of, their siblings, cooking, cleaning, doing the domestic, wearing their domestic hat. Their mothers and fathers are not home. A lot of times their fathers are absent. The mothers are working. They're like, they have to translate. They have to basically wear so many hats that they start lagging behind in school and lagging behind in taking care of themselves, their bodies, their emotional selves as well. Mm-hmm. And that, just leads them to being depressed.
Yeah, our online community is completely echoing that sentiment. I have a tweet here from Agela. She says, despite the achievements and talents of many Latino immigrants, yet when it comes to employment, Latino are only good for housemaid or low-paying jobs. I also have a tweet here from Nestle Han. She says that Latina population may be caught up between cultural differences and a bit misunderstood like some migrant communities. So would you say that a lot of these issues that we're seeing and that the Latina population is facing is also common amongst many other immigrant populations?
Well, I think it is common, but right now, in the past several years, the reports that you see in the media kind of like, sardine all the Latino communities into one little checkbox. And, with that, the code words out there like illegal and immigrant start to become part of the mainstream psyche. And then all of a sudden, kids repeat what they hear at home. And then these kids go to school and tell other girls that are not even, whose parents were even born here, that are, second, third generation Puerto Rican, Dominican, Honduran Americans, that they're not American, they don't belong here. And you know how it is, not feeling like you don't belong can lead to, depression.
Lauren, one of the things that Raquel brought up was this idea of family dynamics and the things that are happening internally that are affecting these young women outside the family in their daily lives. And your study looked at family dynamics between Latin adolescents and their parents, and you compared those who attempted suicide to those who had not. What were the differences that you found?
Well, I think that was one really important part of the study was the fact that we're looking at girls who don't attempt suicide, who are experiencing similar phenomena such as trauma, living in poor neighborhoods. And what we see is that the Latinas who are attempting suicide really aren't able to foster some sort of important connection, either with their parents or with their siblings. And so for non-attempting adolescents, if they find a connection, it's usually outside the family with a school guidance counselor or with their friends. And Latina who attempt suicide just cannot foster that connection.
There was an article summarizing a study done at UC Davis last year, and it points out that the U.S. doesn't do enough to handle mental health care for Hispanics. In fact, it says that Western medicine's best doesn't seem well tailored to reduce mental health care disparities in Latino communities, a stubborn problem in which the population has been underserved and lacking quality care for decades. Now, there is one woman who's been trying to call attention to this problem in California. It's Representative Grace Napolitano. Last September, she actually held a mental health summit specifically addressing Latina youth suicide prevention. And she said, quote, "We must continue to destigmatize this issue and promote mental wellness in the Latina youth community and all communities, as it's an issue that affects all of us." So, Raquel, there's a lot to think about here, because when we're talking about destigmatizing this issue, we have to discuss, one, whether mainstream psychiatry knows how to address it. Is it on their radar? Two, how does the Hispanic community feel about issues of mental health? And then three, are these resources even available, government or otherwise, to help address these problems?
Well, there's definitely a stigma even within the Latino communities, which has led to a lot of these organizations that are trying to help Latina teens not get funding. So people are working on a shoestring budget, and a lot of Latina teenagers are not being served. And we need more, bilingual, but also bicultural mental health professionals to take interest and to, really focus in on these teenagers that are not being served in their communities.
Beatrice, what are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. And here at Communal Life, our founder, Dr. Rosa Gill, specifically addresses that with her multicultural relational approach, which what we do is that we not only speak their language, but like Raquel said, our treatment is bicultural. We tune into their history, where they came from, because their history has a lot to do with where they are now. So our psychiatrists, our therapists, our case managers are all culturally trained to work with our patients, which is it's important and imperative in order for us to see
this is a
progress
unique issue, though, to be on the radar of a psychologist or a psychiatrist that's treating these kids. This wouldn't be something that psychiatrists would be broadly aware of, right? This is more of a specialized...
Right, but this is what we're saying, and this is the awareness that we want to bring out for the world to know, that it's important that the psychiatrists, the psychologists, the general practitioners, the staff in the schools, the teachers, the school counselors are all trained so that they are aware of what they should be looking for, because if they don't tap into their history and their culture, they're really not going to get far into what the root of the problem is.
Let's go to our online community here. Leon Marcus is saying it's not only an issue of racism, but low self-esteem and not enough domestic support for a lot of young people who are struggling to cope in an increasingly harder to live in world. I have a video question now from our community. Beatrice, have a listen to this. I want to pose this question to you.
Perez. I currently live in Denver, Colorado, but I'm originally from Mexico. When I first came to the United States, I wanted to assimilate into this new culture, become one of them. At the beginning, my parents weren't very supportive. They were always like, "You're so white, you're turning so American, like, what happened to you?" I had an identity crisis between who I wanted to be and who my parents wanted me to be. I think a lot of Latinas go through this. They have an identity crisis. And I think this is the reason why they feel so lonely and separated from the rest of the people or their family, which is why it might lead them to commit suicide.
So Beatrice, this is something that's common with a lot of other immigrant populations, but what is it that makes the identity crisis so unique to the Latina population?
I think is what Raquel touched on previously, that these girls are, whether they're migrating from a different country or some of them are actually born here, that they are not fitting in. Like when we go into the school systems, I've witnessed this myself, or even in the homes, like this viewer just mentioned, that it's coming even from within the homes, that the parents are kind of discriminating against their own children. For example, a lot of our girls are also going through sexual identity crisis. And, as you're very well aware, in the Latino culture, that's taboo. If you're religious, that's even considered a sin. So here we're even within our own homes, parents are discriminating and sometimes even bullying their own kids. You take that to the school, is the same thing happening. So everywhere that these girls are going or associating with, they're being discriminated, segregated, put down. So this is where the low self-esteem issue comes into play, and this is what our program addresses.
Eric Ibarra, speaking of low self-esteem and dealing with these issues, your project called the Los Photos Project is using really creativity and art to help young kids and these girls deal with these issues. What is it about the art that you find helps increase the self-esteem among these kids?
First of all, thanks for having me. I think with art, the biggest thing that really helps with our programming is that students are creating something. They're getting the opportunity to use their imagination. and just be creative. A group of other young women that are their age that are also going through the same life experiences. And art can just be a very therapeutic process. We choose to use cameras. However, just art in general, I think, is something that could really help boost self-esteem and just allow young people to be creative.
You know, we're talking about these young women who really have to defy the odds, and one Latina woman who did that is named Lucy Flores. All 6 of her sisters became pregnant as teens. 4 of her brothers were either in prison or murdered. In this YouTube video, she explains what helped her get out of a life of crime.
Fortunately for me, I had people who intervened. A major person in my life was my parole officer, and then later on, co-workers, all who convinced me that I was capable of more. I got my GED, I enrolled at the Community College of Southern Nevada. Now I'm a third-year law student. I am also running for a state assembly seat in the state of Nevada.
Now remember, that was 4 years ago she was running. 4 years later, today, Lucy is a state assembly member in Nevada. We reached out to her today to see what advice she would give young Latinas. Here's what she said.
These kids have to know that there's so much more out there. They might not know it because they don't see it, but they have to know that it exists. And they know that it exists by seeing people like me and by seeing people like others who have experienced similar challenges, but have completely, created new lives for themselves. And at the end of the day, that's really what it's about. It's about taking that initiative within yourself and believing that there's more out there and that you don't have to settle for the things that you were just happened to be born with.
Lauren, how important is it for these young girls to find Latina role models that they can identify with, women like Assemblywoman Flores?
I think it's extraordinarily important. One of the things that we've talked a little bit about is how sometimes the family dynamics are a little bit complicated. And so sometimes it's really important for these girls to be able to go beyond themselves and find involvement in something that's a bit larger for them, because they need to find their place in the world. They need to feel grounded in their experience. And I think having these kind of role models would really help.
Speaking of role models, Beatrice, you certainly are one. Your mom came here from Ecuador. She had you at a young age. She herself had attempted suicide. So you were very aware of these issues very early on. Do you find now that there are other Latinas that had similar experiences to yours who are now doing like you're doing and reaching out to this younger generation?
I actually feel yes, and Raquel Cepeda is actually an example of that. I think we both had a really rough childhood and we were able to defy the odds, but some of us did it on our own, and what we want to do now for these girls is exactly that, become mentors to them. And the project that we're doing with Raquel, even in the book that she wrote, a lot of our girls are us. And this is why these programs are helpful, because someone else mentioned about exposing them to other worlds. Some of our girls here, we have 2 programs, one in the Bronx and one in Brooklyn. A lot of our girls haven't even left their boroughs. So what we want to do is expose them to other things. One of the things that we also do is we do a lot of school advocacy. Like I mentioned, a lot of these girls, the majority of them have been left back at least once. So we're actually also working with the school systems and offering them training so that they're aware of what these young ladies are experiencing.
Our online community is chiming in. Raik says, does it have anything to do with the fact that faltering mental health is not considered a health problem? Camila is saying, many Latinas grow up under cultural and economic segregation, stigmas promoted by machismo, chauvinist mentality, and by Catholic faith. So, Eric, I want to ask you this question. Would you think with handling 2 or 3 jobs, lots of kids, that maybe therapy and treating mental health might be a luxury that many Latinas just can't afford?
No, I don't necessarily think it's a luxury. I think it should be integrated into everybody's lifestyle. Mental health, physical health, it's definitely something that you need in order to just be overall a healthy individual. I'd like to touch on something that was mentioned earlier about mentoring. I think that's a very big component in this in the solution to this issue. More people stepping up to mentor youth in their community, to really act as a positive role model and an example of what these young ladies can become. I think it's that disconnection to examples in their community. For example, if a young woman wanting to be a photographer or an artist, but maybe her parents are not necessarily seeing that as an option for her to go into as a career, and making that connection with people in their own community, of people who have gone that route and have been successful, I think is very important.
Beatrice, sometimes things work better from the bottom up than the top down. What's your sense of how this problem can best be solved? Is it through grassroots organizations such as yours, or is it from the top down at either a state or a federal level where more resources are financially dumped into this?
I think from the bottom up, grassroots organizations like these really are effective and make a dent. And it's important that the community is involved, and that's something that we try hard to do, that we involve our community. And it's important because you can't do this on your own. This work is hard, and it takes a lot of dedication and intervention and time. And unfortunately, because of low funding, some organizations don't have the staff or the manpower to do that. So from the bottom up.
Raquel, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about, well, I read something before that somebody tweeted about it not being so much about race, but I think that this four-letter word that we don't like to talk about as Americans and Latinos is really at the bottom of the well of a lot of the issues. When you have children, for example, who are second-generation Eastern Europeans, they become white and therefore become privileged at some point. And they don't have the same stigmas that a lot of these young Latino Americans have, where race and an identity is foisted upon them. Then to add to that, kids, and I know I went through this at parochial and public schools across America, learn very negative things about where their ancestors came from. For example, I've always been taught that, the Amerindians, the indigenous people of the Caribbean and South America were completely wiped out by Columbus and his crew. And also, I learned that, they're docile. Africans were docile, and the European missionaries were God-fearing, God-loving. All these code words make us not feel so good about ourselves when we look at ourselves in the mirror and see traces of indigenous and African roots. And this is why I'm doing an ancestral DNA project with these girls at LIP, where when they find out, and they've all found out, that they either have direct maternal roots in West Africa or with the indigenous populations of the Americas, I tell them, listen, you descend from people that survived, that had found a way, even if it's in fragments, to survive, and now you owe it to yourself and to your community and to them to also survive. And with that said, I think it's very empowering.
Beatrice, what does it take to turn these girls around? Give us an example of one of your success stories and the amount of work and resource and energy you need to put into every individual.
Oh, definitely. We do have a lot of success stories, and I'll start with one that was really powerful for us. This was a young lady in our Brooklyn location who was suffering from depression, suicidal ideation, severe social anxiety, chronic absences, couldn't function in school. She was about to be a high school dropout. And due to our intervention, since she wasn't going to school, then we would ask her to come and spend time with us at the program, where we would do activities with her, just like walk around the block, teach her how to look people in the eye and have more confidence. This young lady is now in college. She's about to graduate and complete her associate's degree. And this is a real success story because she's our first to start college and almost about to continue on to continue her bachelor's. These, like you said, what does it take? It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of dedication, intervention, and again, working with the family, because we can't work with the girls without working with the families, because if we don't work with the families when they go home, then everything we've done will be undone. So a lot of intervention, a lot of time and dedication.
Lauren, what follow up on that with the role that a support system outside of the family plays in oftentimes really rescuing these young women?
I mean, I would like to add, there was that comment about Western medicine and kind of the faulty aspects of it. And another problem with kind of Western psychiatry is the focus on the individual. And so like Beatrice has mentioned, we've got to include the family, but sometimes that's not always practical. So trying to levy as many resources as we can, the family, the school, peer networks, religious organizations, in a way that allows these girls to have a web of relationships with which they can rely on.
All right, Lauren, on that note, we are going to have to end the program because we're out of time, but we'd ask all of you to stay with us for the post show. It's coming up next. It's streamed at aljazeera.com, and we're going to continue this conversation. So hope to see you online in about 30 seconds. There we are. Welcome to the Streams Online Post Show. I'm Lisa Fletcher. We want to get back to our conversation. We have Beatrice Coronel, Raquel Cepeda, Lauren Gulbas, and Eric Ibarra joining us. We're talking about Latina teens in the U.S. They have the highest rate of suicide among girls their age, and that number keeps going up. And we're asking what's making them feel so hopeless and helpless and what can be done. And one of our guests today is among those helping to change the tide, Eric Ibarra. And I want to talk a little more to you, Eric, about the Las Fotos project. It's a huge confidence builder, using art to get into these kids' lives, to open them up, to give them self-esteem. Talk a little bit specifically about what the project is doing and how you do what you do.
Yeah, definitely. I think the first point is really that the project doesn't necessarily give the students self-esteem or empower them. Building self-esteem and self-confidence is something that comes from the workshops and the projects, but ultimately that comes from the students themselves. The programs are based in different communities throughout Los Angeles. So we work in communities such as Boyle Heights, El Sereno, Koreatown, Santa Ana, Long Beach, all communities that have high Latino populations. And we identify local artists and photographers to act as mentors on these programs. So really the youth are learning firsthand from people from their community. And they create different projects based on social issues that face their community or on really beautiful things about their community that they'd like to represent and share with the world. So that's really the bulk of the project.
Let's go to our online community. Raquel, we have somebody tweeting exactly to the point you made earlier in the show. Considering the effect of racism, it's not surprising that Hispanic women get low-paying jobs and educational barriers. And then we have Elias My Hope saying, Latina, why fit in? Be yourself, be outstanding, fight the current. So Eric, would you agree? Do you think that maybe we need to have a completely different current going out towards this issue, and we should just embrace our differences?
No, definitely. I totally agree with that. I think the idea of being proud of who you are and being proud of your history and your culture, I think that really is what makes you a more confident person. The idea of having to become somebody else just because society is telling you that you are not supposed to be here, or the way you speak or the way your family speaks is wrong, I think that's definitely the wrong approach. Just literally telling somebody that who they are is not right. And I don't think that's ever a good solution.
Beatrice, what about the relationship between physical and mental well-being playing a role in all this? I mean, diabetes, obesity, those are significant problems in the Hispanic community.
Thank you for bringing that up. Here at Life vs. Precious, we currently have a healthy initiative where one of our case managers, Wendy Lopez, who's completing her master's in nutrition, is working with our girls. And what we do is we teach them the connection between the emotional and the physical well-being and how one balances the other. So we actually cook with them. A lot of our girls lived in an impoverished community. Shopping on a budget is hard, especially when we know that the healthier that one wants to eat, the more expensive it is. So she actually does a lot of workshops with them and with the family members where we teach them how to eat healthier. A lot of our girls went from eating really unhealthy foods to eating a lot more vegetables daily. And we do see that a lot of our girls may have families who are suffering from diabetes or obesity. So teaching them that taking care of their physical well-being can actually decrease some of the physiological symptoms that they're seeing, it has been very effective.
You know, Lauren, one of the reasons that may be happening is because a lot of times these parents are gone, they're working 2 and 3 jobs, there's not really the time to be doing things like cooking with your children. And there are studies out there that say these strained relationships that occur between Latina mothers and daughters may actually be a driver for suicide among Latina girls. What did your research show?
You know, a lot of the research does look at Latinas and their relationships with their mothers, but I think because our study looked at we had a large group of girls, 150 attempting adolescents and their parents, and we do see that it can be more variable than that. That it can be their relationship with their father, it can be their relationship with their sibling, and effectively it's not having the intimacy in that relationship as a way to ground their experiences of bullying and racism and not feeling like they fit in the world. If you don't have somebody there to help relate and help talk to you about those experiences, you're left feeling completely alone in this world, and I think that's why they turn to suicide.
Raquel?
And I also think that part of the problem is trying to completely assimilate to what is perceived as American culture. I read a study called Inheriting the City. It turned into a book where they studied Latino Americans around this area where I live, which is Washington Heights, Inwood, and they found out that a lot of people selectively acculturated from the Latino community, specifically the Dominican American community.
Selectively acculturated?
Yes.
Explain what that means.
Selective acculturation, where you don't completely assimilate, where you take the parts of the culture that's very, I'm born in New York City. I'm very much a New Yorker. I'm an American, but I'm also of Dominican descent. So you pick what works for you in your old, in the old world, in your parents' homelands, and then you mix that in with what's going on here for it to work for you. And I think that's really good, especially for women, because our parents' values is that you become domesticated, and we want to go to school, become educated, and lead our communities. So it's a melding of both cultures, and to selectively acculturate, I think that's where the answer lies.
Well, that's got to be empowering for these young women, because then they're not left feeling like I'm leaving one or the other behind.
Exactly, because you see, we saw that young lady from Colorado earlier today, and she really looked like she was going through some kind of identity crisis still. Because she's trying so hard to become completely American, and then that's creating a rift with her family. And there's nothing wrong with being both. This is a country that's really all made up of hyphenated Americans, people that that have to reconcile the old world with this world. So if other people can do it, if Italian Americans can do it, and Irish Americans can kiss each other on St. Patrick's Day, then why can't we selectively acculturate and celebrate both of our cultures?
And Beatrice, that really gets back, though, to a lot of what you were saying, which is if you don't have the family on board with this, it's going to be really tough for these kids.
Exactly. So it's kind of like mediating between the two, because you need both. Without one, the other won't work. You need the families involved in order for the girls to actually decrease the suicidal ideation and the depression.
And we talked a bit about the mother's relationship and her role that could perhaps be a driver in these suicides, but what about the men? What about the fathers? How do they fit in?
Well, what we see with a lot of our girls is that for the most part, the fathers are not involved. And that, so again, and I mentioned this earlier, that the lack of emotional availability is not there. And somebody mentioned connection. Connection is big. If they're not connecting with their parents, they're not connecting with people in their schools, they're not connecting with anyone in the outside world, this is where we see that they become isolated. And this is where the suicidal ideation kicks in.
All right, Raquel, I want to give you the last word. Wrap this up for us. Where are we headed?
Well, that's a lot of pressure. To actually wrap it up, I would say for young Latin American teens, explore yourself. Don't let anybody define you. This is America. This is supposed to be the land of the free, and it's your choice to identify yourself as you see fit. And also remember, identity is fluid. So how you see yourself today may not be how you see yourself in 5 years, and that's okay. That's cool.
Not just a good word for young Latina women, but a good one for everybody. Thank you for ending us on that note. Our thanks to Beatrice Cornell, Raquel Cepeda, Lauren Gulbas, and Eric Ibarra for joining us today. Between now and next Monday, we hope to see you online. It's streamed at aljazeera.com.